coming out here this morning. To my left, we do have a voters registration table as well as the Census 2020 table. I just want to remind you, if you haven't registered to vote yet, please do so. If you haven't completed the census yet, please do so. For those who don't know me, I'm Alexander Conyers. And like many of the young men that has been involved on both sides of these tragic murders, I too walked in their shoes at one time. For those who don't know me well, I too was born to a teenage mother. For those who really don't know me, I was born cross town. And then I moved to Browntown. And then we moved to Lincoln Park. So I know this area and I know it well. So folks ask me, why do you still care? I've been gone for over 25 years now. And I spent the last 25 years in prison. Now folks ask me, well, Conyers, you served in the Army. You haven't spent the 25 years in prison, but I have. My last 25 years in the Army, I was primarily responsible for the Army's military prison system. And if this was easy, the Army would have fixed it. But the Army also has military prisons. So I've been on both sides every single day, talking to parents like Reverend Kendricks, talking to parents like Mr. Powell. So I understand that, and I can assure you that no one here this morning want to trade places with either of those two this weekend. Now, I just met Mr. Powell about a month ago. I just saw his pain for losing a child, and I just reached out to him because I really wanted him to know that he had the power. He had the power to affect change, to bring people together. And as we talk about these murders, there has to be no greater pain than for a mom or a dad to lose a child, regardless of how that might be, whether it's in combat. We've had young men of this community die in war, whether it's in a tragic accident, whether it's illness. But the thought of your loved one being taken intentionally by the one you love so much, that's a tough bridge to cross. That is so tough. So I've served almost 30 years in the Army, and I've served with some heroes, but none as big as Dave Powell and Reverend Kendrick for the intestinal fortitude they had this morning to stand before you and lay their souls bare and tell you how much it hurts and tell you that it's not their fault. So what those two parents did this morning, they can help all of us. They can actually help all of us. And this day that we remember today is a national day that we haven't honored yet. In 2007, Congress passed a national law that made September 25th, which was yesterday, the National Day of Remembrance for murder victims. And I wish we didn't have that law. I wish we didn't need it, but we needed it for closure. We needed it just like there are events to honor cancer victims and suicide victims and other victims. We needed this for these families that stand before me today. And again, it just isn't the murders, domestic violence. We have a family here whose sweet sister, sweet aunt was taken away in a domestic violence incident. In South Carolina, for the last 15 years, have been ranked in the top 10 of states where women are killed by their partners, whether it's husbands or boyfriends. Just this week, we went from being in the top 10. Now we're number 11, still too high. So whether it's domestic violence, whether it's murder, we have the power to force change. When you think about the changes that has occurred in our country after tragedy, it's because of parents When you think about MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, parents forced that movement. When you think about the Amber Alert that you see when you're driving on the interstate, parents forced that because a young girl named Amber was kidnapped. When you think about the law South Carolina just passed, Samantha's Law, because that young lady was found dead here in Clarendon County in New Zion Gable area. That law was passed to force Uber and Lyft to ensure that they identify themselves. So parents, you can make a change, but you have to make sure that you work together. You have to understand that everyone doesn't share your vision. You have to find those with visions like yours and show up together in force. Show up at the council meetings. Show up at all of these events. Today, I know we have some elected officials here today. I'm pretty sure I saw Councilman Jay Dukes, I believe. There's Councilman Dukes. I saw Auditor Patricia Pringer is over here. Is there any other elected officials? Again, you must show up. You have the power to change. It was 15 years ago when this community had never honored a great Althea Gibson, who was the world's greatest tennis player long before Venus and Serena Williams. We got together long before Facebook, and we went to 3 or 4 different school board meetings and forced them to name the tennis courts at Manning High School in honor of Althea Gibson. Now, when they did that, they said, we won't have the money to pay for the monument, the plaque, if you go out to the high school. This was before Facebook. We raised the money to do that. That's right. So what Dale and the other folks have done this week is phenomenal. They raised the money to pay for these banners behind me. They're raising money to put a billboard out on one of these major highways that talks about stopping the violence. I just wanted to be a part of this today because I told Dale about this day, but I did not plan this. Dave Power, Mr. Wilson, they planned this. And I'll tell you, look at the crowd that's here for the first time. Now, ideally, what we want is less and less people killed. Right. But for those who do lose loved ones, we must remember them. We must honor them. And if it was easy, it would be done by now. It would be done in Charleston. It would be done in New York. It would be done in Baltimore. And I'm connected to just about all of these families that are affected by this. I'm also connected to Reverend Kendricks and the story that she told about the young man who was killed in Orangeburg on the campus of South Carolina State, where I graduated from. That young man lives I have a house in Orangeburg that my family lived in when I went to Afghanistan. And that young man that was killed lives as closest to my house as that stoplight that I'm looking at there. So I know that family that was killed. I know the young brother, Chris, and I saw the pain in Chris for many, many years afterwards. So we're all connected through this. But one thing that we can't do, if we're gonna get better, we can't point fingers. We simply cannot point fingers. Because guess what? Even if I blame someone else, that may be true. If I blame parents, that part could be true. If I blame the school system, that could be true as well. Elected officials, you name it. But it's gonna take all of us working together. Everybody has a part in this. Our parents, our school system has a huge part in this. Our school systems need to be funded so when they see these young men that they think are at risk, that they identify them, and they need to treat every young man the same. Some young men, they treat as having a bad day, and they're called the parents. Yes. Other young men, they call the school resource officer and put them in the system. We must stop the school to prison pipeline, and we must hold our school officials accountable. Our elected officials, no, they absolutely cannot fund the things that we would like to see as far as recreation, but they play a part in this as well, in trying to get other folks to bring those entities to this county. Everyone plays a part in this, and we need everyone to do their part. we have some franchise players around here. We can build a new team here today, and in a year or two, we can have a championship team.
That's right.
I've lived in Toronto for a year. I know that Toronto was one of the last teams added to the NBA, but yet they were the champions last year. When I look around here today, we have players. If you sign up for this team, if you come out and you work hard and you show up for practice every day and learn the game, learn how to affect change, we can be a championship team. I cannot end my speech while I'm looking at this Confederate monument in front of me.
Right.
1914, they erected that to honor the soldiers from Clarendon County who fought for the Confederacy, for Southern rights, for the right to maintain slaves, but they built that so that folks will always remember them. And if we can honor them on this courthouse yard, then every year we can honor those folks from Manning that we've lost to violence.
Yes.
So again, I just want to thank all of you. My condolences are with you. I certainly don't know the pain, but I've seen it for 25 years, talking to family members. I certainly think I understand just a little bit. I have a 19-year-old son. I have a 17-year-old daughter. I understand when my son isn't home at a certain time, I begin to wonder, where is he? When my daughter is out with her friends, I understand. But I certainly don't stand here and claim to understand your pain. But I want you to know that my thoughts and my prayers are with you.
That's right.
Whether it's through murder, through violence in the streets, whether it's domestic violence, whichever way that violence came to you, this community will stand behind you. And let me tell you another thing. You don't have to be an elected official to make change. It helps, but you don't have to be one. You just need to know how to force them to make decisions. I'm old enough to know personally, 3 young men from Clarendon County who have been on or still on death row. So this isn't new. We have 3 men here, 3 African-American men that I know of personally that have committed murder in our community and have been sentenced to death row. We don't need that. We need all of our young men. We need all of our young men.
That's right.
When we stop the killing, we save young men on both sides. Again, this day is about remembering those victims from our community who's been murdered. My condolences with these families. Thank you for showing up, and we will continue to honor. At this time, we will have our closing.